What's the future of the Smoothie King Center? Was it a mistake for the Pelicans to trade away Jrue Holiday? And the Pelicans' preseason schedule has been released, and there's two big things missing. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans, and the NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday. And we're doing a mailbag episode. I put out a call for questions on X, Twitter, whatever it is, and y'all delivered, and there were some really good ones, and we're going to focus on two of them here, the Smoothie King Center and then Jrue Holiday, before getting into something a little weird, and it may be a good way, with the Pelicans preseason schedule. And both of these questions lead to bigger discussions, which is why I picked them in the first place here. So this is going to be a fun episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. So let's get into this one. This one comes from at NOLA Headline. What is the future of the Smoothie King Center? Renovations or new arena? Kind of a prediction. Just want to hear what you think. So there was that whole kerfluffle, whatever you want to call it, with the Saints and the state basically on the Superdome and payments, but not having the money for the payments, just not making the payments. We don't need to get into all of that because one of the things that came out of it was, well, it'll delay some stuff with the Smoothie King Center, and it will and it won't. The payments got made. This hasn't really kind of delayed anything, and ultimately what that would have delayed was a feasibility study on the arena, or like a study on the arena, essentially, of like what needs to be changed. They're going to get in there. They're going to look at things compared to other arenas. They're not going to start even doing that work till everything is done with the Superdome renovation. So no matter what, like if you want the one takeaway from this segment is don't expect anything soon when it really, like significantly, when it comes to the Smoothie King Center in the next couple of years. That's where they're going to be playing. It's really as simple as that. If you're looking for my predictions and what's going to change here, I don't expect a new arena would get built. I just don't see where the money's going to come from something like that, and the money's got to come from somewhere. And this is how we're going to talk about Gail Benson in a second and kind of ownership in general with the team. Either the state's going to pay for the money, the city's going to front some money, or ownership is going to pay for the money. You can be rich and have a ton of money, but you might not have the, probably $500 million to $1 billion it would take to build a new arena, let alone finding space for that sort of thing. And while, yes, there's a dream, it's put it down by the river and build a little bit more of a district around it, more restaurants that are literally next door. While the Smoothie King Center is close to a number of things, it's not like they're next door and you still got to do like a 10-minute walk to the arena. And when you look at things like LA Live, or is it Dallas Live too, I think is one of them, Texas Live, whatever it's called, there are things just kind of like right there to hang out at and then go into the arena of the game. So while the Smoothie King Center is not far, it's still a little bit of a walk, and I don't think that's ideal. If you were to put it closer to the convention center, a little bit closer to more hotels, you have people that would be in town for whatever and then just go next door to go to a game because it's right there. And a new arena is a draw. That's why you want something like that. You want people to go into your building. That equals more revenue, more money that you can then hopefully spend on the team, pay the luxury tax, those sorts of things. But I don't think that's going to happen. What I think ultimately you'll get is some sort of study that says we got to renovate the Smoothie King Center, and then they renovate the Smoothie King Center and probably do it over stages like the Superdome is being done, but probably not anything that's going to put it on like the cutting edge of arenas, stadiums around the country, around the world, right? You're not going to get a Chase Center like where the Golden State Warriors play. personally, to me, I don't need some of those fancy features. I think some of them are very cool. Being at SoFi and seeing that kind of like video thing that goes around was really cool. It was just nice. There were areas to kind of hang out in, which is great. I want a seat to go watch the game more than anything else. That's my number one thing. Give me cheap beer, cheap concessions, and a place to watch the game and make the seats somewhat comfortable, and I'll be happy. They need to redo a lot of the seating in the Smoothie King Center. They probably need to change the coloring and stuff like that. I think you'll see a lot of that. I think those are the type of things that are going to get done. I think you'll get eventually a new fancy video board that you could put in there and install and all of those things. But there are limitations to that building. And I think that's going to be evident whenever it, in 5-10 years gets renovated sort of thing. You will see some like upgrades and things like that over the coming years. I believe they're going to get a new sound system in there, which has not been great in the building for a while. And I believe that's coming next year, and that's going to be new. That's something I've said before on the show. So that's something to expect. So you'll get those kind of things, but ultimately, will it be like a transformative experience? Like I don't see that being the case. And I think that's made more than anything. It's partially a money thing, but also just like where you're going to put that building. And if you were to do that, it goes beyond the half a billion to $1 billion. That then is like a $3, $4, $5 billion project of putting in restaurants, finding tenants, all of those things. There's a lot of work that goes on with that when the easier thing is just going to be to renovate it. Maybe a comp out, maybe not. One of the things that I think people, if they don't build an arena, is there's going to be a target put on Gail Benson ownership with this team for being cheap. And while I don't think they are not cheap, I don't think they're, the way I look at ownership here is I don't think they're the best in the league, certainly not. And I don't think they're even close to the worst. You look at this team and, the big knock on them is they're one of two franchises to have never paid the luxury tax. So yes, but let's keep in mind the Benson family hasn't owned them the entirety of the time. And since the Benson family has owned the Hornets Pelicans, there really hasn't been a year for them to pay the luxury tax. So I'm cutting them a little bit of slack here because looking back on some of the teams, just go with the Anthony Davis era, right? Like, has there been a year when they were in position to pay the tax, or they should have paid the tax, or they cheaped out and traded someone away? Like, not really. Even ducking the tax this past season, I think, was a smart move because there was no need to pay the tax for that team. Ultimately, if that's the decision making, I'm fine with that. This is the year that I'm going to say, if you don't pay the tax, I'm going to take an issue or get close to the tax. And when I did my ideal Pelicans offseason, had them going into the tax by $5 million. I think that's a realistic number, and I think this is the year we'll truly find out. Keep in mind that the practice facility is getting renovated big time. They're spending probably $10 to $15 million renovating the facility currently ongoing right now. That's a great thing. They're putting in new equipment. They're redoing the way it's shaped and laid out and all of that. That's not an insignificant expense. So it's not a new arena, but they are spending some money. So if you renovate the practice facility, if you then, pay the luxury tax this season, I do think that will do a lot to kind of quiet down some of the claims people have about ownership and things like that. But ultimately, a new arena is not going to be entirely up to the Bensons. It's going to be a bigger discussion there. And we laid out some of the reasons why I don't expect to see that. But hopefully we get better sound in the arena next year. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, do you need a retail vending machine for Jordans and other things? Like, that's cool, but I'm probably not actually going to use that. There's other, to me, that's not something that I require. Give me good beer. Give me good food. They need to upgrade that, certainly. Make that stuff, to me is the priority over a lot of those kind of fancy that almost seem gimmicky things. So coming up next, was trading Jrue Holiday a couple of years ago a mistake? I'm going to tell you the answer is no, but there is another part to that. There's another part to that. And that's what I think is interesting about the Jrue Holiday discussion. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. That's up from 3 before. It's a big increase. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 players' stats projections, and then you're locked in. And if you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has got you covered every week. From lowering select players' stats projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Friday, right? Look at the NBA here. The finals. Jaylen Brown, more than 25.5 points. Seems like potentially a good one because he just had 30 plus in game 3 in a closeout game here. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first-time deposit match up to $100 when you download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. What's going on with Alvin Kamara with the contract and all that? That's a little odd to me. Ross Jackson hosts a Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's breaking down everything black and gold. I'm sure he's going to have that covered, as well as everything from mandatory minicamp going on right now. Go make Locked On Saints and Ross Jackson your second listen today. You probably already are, to be perfectly honest. All right, let's get into the next question around Jrue Holiday here. This one comes from @Pels12 in AP. In AP. What if Jrue Holiday had been convinced to stay? And I was on ESPN radio with Gus Cattengill, who, by the way, spoiler alert, it's going to be calling games, I believe, broadcasting games for Pelicans Summer League again. Go Gus. And he asked me that question too, because we just saw in game 2, and I even talked about it here for the Everydayers on Locked On Pelicans. Jrue Holiday has been like masterful for the Celtics. Missing piece for them, it feels like. It's going to be potentially his second title. I mean, let's be realistic. They're up 3-0. It's going to be a second title for him. So were the Pelicans wrong to trade him? Was that a mistake? You know, going back to that deal where they shipped him out to Milwaukee. And the way I answered, there's 2 parts to this question. The simple answer is no, it was not wrong to trade Jrue Holiday. Did it hurt to see him go? Yes. Is he beloved here? Like, absolutely, right? No one has a bad thing other than great things to say about Jrue Holiday. But sending him out in 2019 for the 2020-2021 season, it was definitely the right move. One, it was the right move because he asked. This is someone who put in 7 years here in New Orleans. That is, the most he's played in any spot in his career. 4 years in Philly, 7 years in New Orleans, 3 seasons in Milwaukee, and now this is his first season with the Boston Celtics. That is someone who, because we like him so much, you just want to do right by the guy. There's winning games and all of that, yes, but somehow, I'm going to sound like David Griffin. The people element of things, the human element of things, does matter a little bit. There's times when you want to deny a trade request, absolutely. If Zion were to come out today and be like, I want to be traded, I'd be like, no, too bad, you're under contract. Simple as that. Holiday, when this team just wasn't there yet, I really don't have a problem with doing that. Just doing right by someone who we all kind of love, I think is a right thing. Even if that doesn't matter in terms of signing free agencies or you can make the argument it'll look good to free agents, it'll look good to agents. I don't care about that. I just want to do right by Jrue Holiday. Simple as that. Simple as that. I don't care about any of the other ancillary benefits. There's just some people that you treat that way, do things for. Jrue Holiday, to me, is one of those people. So I don't have a problem with trading him. What I have a problem with what the mistake was how they used some of those assets later. Getting all those picks from the Milwaukee Bucks, the pick swaps, one of which conveyed this year. Those assets have not been used particularly great. So these trades were a little bit more complex than this, but the way you can look at it, in that Jrue Holiday trade, one of the picks was essentially used to trade for Steven Adams. That didn't work out, and that lasted a year. So that's a pick kind of gone wasted. The next year, They flipped Steven Adams for Jonas Valanciunas. They used future picks involved in that deal too to basically bring in Jonas Valanciunas. They're spending assets on the center position, which given Zion, that makes sense. He's not a center, you need one. But none of them were really court spacers, stretch bigs. And so that's where I have the issue with the way the assets were used. We talked about this in yesterday's show when I said, hey, like maybe go after Paul George, and then if it doesn't work out, just blow the team up. Rent your cap space. Rent your cap space. You're not using that cap space to sign free agents because no point in that, right? What you do is you take on bad contracts and you acquire other future first-round picks. I get they wanted to be competitive around Zion Williamson right away, but that should have been the move. Keep stockpiling assets. And that was maybe the way they needed to go, and they didn't. And that's the part, I think, that was so disappointing. Trying to be a little bit too competitive too early. And I want to watch winning basketball. When people were asking me this year, should they tank? Should they lose the play-in game, try and get a lottery pick? No, like try and win games. It's more fun. Fully more fun. But there are certain ways you can approach a rebuild. And the Pelicans, with their assets from the Anthony Davis trade and Jrue Holiday trade, have cashed some of those in. Getting in CJ McCollum, good move. Looking to maybe shake that up a little bit too. And you need to start cashing in those assets or using them because they start to, in a sense, depreciate. And I think that's one of the ways you kind of view that deal right now. Those Bucks picks were kicked as far out as possible, right? So that if Giannis were to leave, those picks look better. When it became kind of apparent that he wasn't going to leave, maybe then you need to just immediately trade those picks because then the Bucks went and got Damian Lillard, and that didn't work out this year, but that makes the team look better. So if a team is like working on a deal with the Pelicans and it's like, oh, well, we'll include one of the Bucks picks. No, they have Giannis and Dame. At least trade that pick before they had Dame, right? They've waited a little bit too long on some of these draft picks, and that's, to me, the bigger issue. The issue was not trading Jrue Holiday. It's what you did with the assets after that. Well, I think David Griffin has done an okay enough job here in New Orleans, and he has, right? There were some misses early on, but definitely kind of fixed some things with Trey Murphy, Herb Jones. The CJ deal was good at the time, and other things. There have also been some like opportunity cost mistakes, I think, of not acting or not using those picks when they were more valuable. And now those assets have depreciated, the value's gone down, and now you can't use them for as much as you'd like to use them for. And that's the mistake. Not doing right by Jrue Holiday, not trading him to a contender. Like, I'm rooting for the Celtics, one, because on Wednesdays, I co-host our Locked On NBA show, our national show, with John Corrales, who's the Locked On Celtics host. He comes down to New Orleans like once or twice a year to hang out with me. So rooting for the Celtics because of that, but also because Holiday's on that team. I want to see him get a second ring. I'm rooting for him. That's a guy I will never not root for. And if he does get a second ring with all the defensive accolades he gets, he's probably like I don't know if he's going to make the Hall of Fame, but he's like a borderline Hall of Famer at that point in time. And that's pretty cool. And I want to see that. So the mistake was not trading Jrue Holiday away. Do right by that guy. There's no, he's still involved in his communities, wherever he is. Like it wasn't just he was out and he played hard and tried all the time, despite all the up and downs here in New Orleans, right? The Anthony Davis trade request, all that other stuff. It was that, he was very involved in the community, donating money, going out and doing things, trying to elevate everyone around him. That's why you want to just do right by that guy. Just like a good person, man. So no, it wasn't a mistake to trade him away. His time here was definitely done, I think, and I'm going to be rooting for him. The mistake was how they managed other things. That Steven Adams year, right? Like that wasn't it. Kind of as simple as that. And so that's what I think you need to kind of factor and consider when it comes to looking at that Jrue Holiday trade, right? Eric Bledsoe and playing him all those games. That's probably my least favorite Pelican player of all time is Eric Bledsoe. Probably without a doubt. Marco Bellinelli's up there. I'm blocked by Marco Bellinelli on Twitter could not even tell you why, but apparently a lot of people are. It's a thing. Okay, coming up next, preseason schedule. Games don't matter. It's the things that are missing from the preseason schedule, from the preseason press release. Let's look at that because that's what I find the most interesting. That's coming up here next. I'll tell you what those are in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. If you have a small business, you can't afford to have a position open. Other people need to cover it. It's maybe hurting your bottom line. It's costing you money. You don't want that. You got to get a hire done and you've got to have it quick. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn is a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. And hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. People use LinkedIn. You know, they might not be going to job boards looking for jobs because they're not actively searching, but they are using LinkedIn. So get your job in front of those folks. When it comes up on the feed and different things like that, all of a sudden maybe that they realize, hey, that looks interesting. That's how you get someone that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. That's the perfect hire for you. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might not have the time or resources to hire. So they're going to make it easy for you. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell a friend about the show as well. Let them know what's going on with this Pelicans team as well. And please join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Now for your second listen, Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go where they talk sports, not where they don't talk sports or just yell all day long. It's curated. They're going to put the best shows on there for you to watch, streaming 24/7 completely free on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So the preseason schedule for the Pelicans has been announced and there's something missing. So the games, October 7th in New Orleans. It's a Monday at 12:30 noon. You have a noon tip-off for the only home preseason game versus the Orlando Magic. The Saints play on Monday Night Football that night, so that's why it's early. Okay, whatever. They always have basically one preseason game. That's it in the Smoothie King Center. Cool, whatever. Then on Friday, October 11th at Orlando. Then Sunday, October 13th at the Miami Heat. And then Tuesday, October 15th at the Houston Rockets. The full schedule usually gets released around mid-August. So they should, from that October 15th date, they'll probably have like 6 days, 7, 8 days, somewhere in there before the opening night game. So a little bit of rest there, which I think will at least be good for them. What I find interesting on this is we have the times for the game. We know where they're going to be played. But, and it says this in the release to me, the press release, broadcast information for all the Pelicans preseason games will be announced at a later date. Okay, they just signed the deal with WWL Radio. You know, you maybe don't carry preseason games if there's other, content shows, programming they want to put on there. Like, I get that. But what about TV? Now you get it, right? What about TV? They don't mention Bally Sports. They don't mention anything else like that. The Pelicans have streamed them on pelicans.com before. I think some of this stuff is unsettled. They'll likely be streamed on pelicans.com would be my assumption. Those aren't always the best experiences on there, but they're trying to get you the game any way they can for you to at least watch. And for someone who is going to watch it and then talk about it on a show, that's a very useful thing. I don't necessarily think this means that Bally Sports is out of the picture. My guess, my understanding is they'll probably have to deal with Bally's another year. Things may change in the meantime, but that's my assumption with the way that kind of bankruptcy process is playing out and Amazon getting involved with that as well. But it's likely going to be Bally's. I don't want you to hold me to that 100%, but I do think it's a little noteworthy that they don't mention it here and that this will get sorted out somewhat later. The other thing that I find intriguing in this is there's no game in Birmingham. They did that last year where the G League affiliate squadron is based out of. maybe that has to do with, some of the stuff that came out after that, right? Christian Clark wrote an article on NOLA.com that, had anonymous players saying like, this is nicer than the Smoothie King Center. This is nicer than our locker rooms. The locker rooms matter to players, not like the be all end all of a free agency decision, but on whether they want to play, but that stuff matters. Maybe it just avoids that sort of thing. But, that I think is kind of blown over and wouldn't really be impactful. So not having a game in Birmingham, I think is a little strange. I don't know the exact reasoning. I couldn't tell you, but it's just a noteworthy omission for that sort of thing. So you'd like to have seen that here for this team, but a little weird, right? Like you want to kind of expand the reach if that's where your G League team is based out of. And, you want to kind of get them on board. You'd like to get the Gulf South region, Alabama, all of that kind of on board with watching Pelicans games, being involved with all that, being like the Pelicans being their team. That is how you do it. Play there. They're not. Couldn't tell you why. They've played preseason games in Shreveport in the past. They played them in Birmingham. I can't remember if they played in Lafayette or not. They might have, or there have been talks about it too. So those are the type of things that I do think matter. Like go do a little bit of a road show with it would be kind of cool. But for whatever reason, you're not going to see that this year. But it also means we kind of have a date for everything, right? We know the schedule is going to come out mid-August. Media Day is usually on the October 1st is what I'm expecting it will be. You get a week of training camp and then you play your first preseason game. Maybe it'll be a little bit earlier, but we'll see. It means we've got dates for when we will see Pelicans basketball, like the team, not Summer League, but the team. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. We'll cover all of those preseason games here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I took a note for a show. There were a couple people that had questions, and this will probably be Monday's episode, Monday or Tuesday, that were about Brandon Ingram when I put out the call for questions. And I liked that because, that's something we're obviously talking a lot about. What I think is going to be really interesting about that is my note to myself on what the show will be is we're not going to guess the Brandon Ingram trade. And I'll tell you why when we talk about that in a future show, Monday or Tuesday, why we won't be able to guess the Brandon Ingram trade. That's going to be next week on Locked On Pelicans. So that's going to do it for this week of Locked On Pelicans. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all next week.